Hello everyone, it's Devin Price. I'm here with another video version of one of my Substack pieces. This one dropped earlier this week. It's called My Nephew is Skeeved Out by My Kinky Life. It's a advice column. I do a autistic advice column that's questions on neurodiversity. I do sex liberation, which is a column on kink and sex and sexual liberation and all of those things. This one is kind of a duel. It's about a person who wrote in, an autistic person who is unmasking, being more open about who they are, including being more open about having kinky interests. But that is freaking out their adult, though, see my piece on interact with minors if you think kids knowing about sex at all is a bad thing, but their adult nephew is skeeved out by them being openly kinky, and it makes them feel ashamed and irresponsible in their relationship with this really cherished relative. And so they want to know how to navigate healthy boundaries and respect for their nephew's reactions with also honoring themselves and not backtracking in their unmasking journey. This is a article I'm really happy to have written and dove into in my career in the last year. More and more, I've been just embracing writing about what I actually feel enlivened by, which is mostly sex and kink and transition as it relates to that, and autism as it relates to that. There is a limit to how much I can continue to write about neurodiversity and burnout because those things cut so close to the bone, and there is rarely, if ever, good news in those areas. If you are overwhelmed watching the news all of the time, and I know many of you already are very active in responding to fascist attacks on trans people and autistic people, but imagine that your day job is also thinking about those things on a very deep level and writing about it all of the time. It makes you want to just not exist. But one thing that does make me still want to exist and actually gives me a hunger to be alive is kink and sex and enjoying some of that freedom that I feel like I finally have. A lot of people, especially right now, do not have any of that freedom, but I also have this feeling of having been closeted and denying myself for a very long time, and I want to be alive for whatever years I get and actually living them as myself, doing things that feel good. So I related very strongly to this writer's question. I've also navigated sexual boundaries and writing and speaking publicly about kink with family relationships myself, as you'll see in the piece. So here in this video, I am just going to read the advice column out to you, provide descriptions of all of the images in the post, and maybe describe some relevant links that are in there. So this is for accessibility purposes, as always. If you're not a reader, if you prefer to get your content in a audio-visual format, or you're busy, all of those other reasons, I am here for you. So without further hemming and hawing, I'll switch on over to my screen share and pop up the video. As always, my essays are free to read at drdevinprice.substack.com. And the Substack app also has a audio robot reader, so you can listen that way immediately when a piece comes out as well. But I am going to try to stick to making video versions of these as much as I can. So this piece is entitled, My Nephew is Skeeved Out by My Kinky Life. How do I stay true to myself without ruining the relationship? Setting boundaries without shame. The cover image for this piece is from Unsplash. It is a wooden an artist's hand that is posed usually as a reference for artists, and it's holding a ear of corn against a kind of pale blue backdrop, and that is because corn is both suggestive in shape, it's phallic, but also a lot of people online use corn as a censorship of porn. So that's the little cheeky usage there. Showing, knowing acknowledgement of sex, but also it's a wink, it's a little bit discreet, which is a little bit relevant to what we're going to be talking about here today. So that's the theory behind it, if you will. We've got a quick and dirty autistic advice / sex liberation question in the ask box today from an autistic person whose journey of self-acceptance has meant getting a whole lot more openly interested in kink. Unfortunately, their newly sexually liberated lifestyle gives their younger, but still adult, nephew the ick. And the shame and guilt that this is stirring up is threatening to send Anon back into masking who they are. Let's take a look. Here's the screenshot of the ask from Tumblr. Anonymous asked, "Hey doc, autistic unmasking advice ask here. I've been getting more hyperfixated on kinky sex stuff, and this weekend my nephew confided in me that my interest in this stuff makes him uncomfortable. He's an adult, but he spent a good chunk of his childhood living with me, and I'm the only family member he's still in touch with. I still kind of think of him as my kid. And this revelation that I've said and done things that made him uncomfortable has me feeling pretty crushed. It's really putting this whole unmasking journey of mine to the test, because letting him down like this makes me feel like I'm just another adult in his life who failed him by being too deviant/weird/unhinged. Do you have any thoughts on this? I know you've written about the fact that sometimes unmasking alienates people, but what about when it alienates someone who you feel responsible for protecting?" Hi, Anon. Thank you for writing in with this question. I'm someone who lives their sexual deviance out in the open, so I've faced dilemmas somewhat like yours. Not long ago, a younger adult relative who looks up to me admitted that reading all of my essays about cruising and kink do make them feel a little bit awkward. And I know that I would feel the same way in their position. Thankfully, this relative is a canny student of human psychology and a highly analytical autistic person. I guess it runs in the family or something. So they were able to separate their own reactions to the subject from their sense of what my responsibility should be in what I say or cover. So we were able to address the whole thing with humor. I've been very brashly open about a lot of things over the years, from my family history to my identity to my ever-evolving radical politics, which has established to everyone in my family that if they don't like something about how I live, they're gonna have to just get over it and do what they can to manage their own exposure to things that they don't want to read. That's worked well for me. It's also filtered out friends and professional contacts who wouldn't accept how I genuinely live, and made me impossible to blackmail. There is a refuge to be found in audacity. But there is also a particular hell to having the most sensitive parts of you be scrutinized by a wide audience, and slowly coming to realize that how a loved one sees you has fundamentally shifted because of something they learned about you that they cannot understand. Seeing that shift of incomprehension and discomfort behind someone's eyes hurts. And it can be really embarrassing to be seen as a sexually fixated, kinky person, especially when you're still working to liberate your life from shame. You clearly want to do right by your nephew, whom it's lovely you feel protective of, but you don't want negotiating around his feelings and judgments to pull you back into closeting yourself. So what do you do? I think this answer is fairly simple, actually. I think that you have the opportunity to have a really valuable conversation with your nephew about how a person should handle feelings of discomfort, and a chance to negotiate adult boundaries with him that will really enrich your relationship and help it to grow for the long haul. First of all, thank your nephew for sharing with you that he has been feeling this way. He's telling you that he is finding something challenging in your relationship, which gives you both the chance to do something about it. And that is wonderful. You've helped him grow into a young man who can acknowledge his feelings, and he trusts you enough to share something that he must know could put you off. That is a testament to the health of your relationship. Next, understand that what your nephew is sharing with you is data. It is not a moral declaration of your failure, and it is not shame. It is not him shaming you. I understand that it might not be pleasant to hear that he's grossed out, but he's not actually telling you that what you are doing or are interested in is gross. Just that he finds this particular topic really unsettling, at least when it's attached to a relative. It's wonderful that your nephew is letting you know a little bit about his own feelings regarding sex and kink and how difficult those topics are for him to navigate. He might not want to get into it in detail with you, which is his right, but by being so open about your own sexuality, you have opened the door for you both to have frank conversations about your sex lives and how much you acknowledge sex to one another. This is only going to help him develop better, stronger sexual boundaries for himself in the future. It is actually because of your choice to be so open and casual about sex that he is now free enough to set his own limits surrounding it. So pat yourself on the back a bit for creating a chill, sex-neutral environment. And here is a piece I wrote earlier this year in March called Sex Neutrality. Really encourage checking it out. It's very central to kind of my thesis of how I approach sexual topics in my writing. This idea that sex is just a neutral human activity. It is not dangerous. It is not life-saving. It's just a thing people do, like eating or shitting, that can be beautiful, can be relief, can be gross, but it is necessary for some people. Other people have their own relationship to it. It's just a facet of life that you're going to have to accept is a part of human life, no matter your own relationship to it. And you don't have to like it. And you don't have to engage in it if you don't want to. It's just a thing that humans are in general going to engage with. Let yourself process all the feelings of shame and mortification this has kicked up for you. It's natural that you'd feel like you've overstepped some line, traumatized him, made a disgusting display of yourself, damaged one of his familial relationships, or whatever other narrative your anxieties are telling you. It's okay to feel ashamed sometimes. You are not a failure at candor and sex positivity. Keep in mind, your nephew is not telling you to stop having sex or being kinky or to stop being open about those things. He's sharing that he is having a hard time and wants your help as someone who loves you and looks up to you. Your role in that is to provide him with help navigating his discomfort, not to eradicate anything about yourself that he might not like or approve of. Though it will probably freak you out to hear your own nephew speaking negatively about your sex life, try to really listen to the emotional truth behind his words. You can ask him to share more about what has been bothering him, if he likes. He might be responding the way he is out of fear of sex, shame about his own desires, identity confusion, past experiences of being bullied for his own differences, prejudices that he's internalized, a sexual abuse history of his own, or any other number of things. And you can respect where he is coming from emotionally without ever agreeing that what you are doing is wrong or needs to be hidden from plain sight. Next, have a real conversation with your nephew about what he can control his exposure to. Keep this very practical and focused on boundaries that you and he can set to prevent causing problems in the relationship. None of this is about changing your sexual habits or how central they are to your life. What can be changed, though, is how you two communicate about your lives, especially if you learned more about your kinky special interests through social media. Are you social media mutuals? If it skeeves him out to see you posting sexy photos or posting about your fixations, he can just unfollow you. Or you can agree to create a separate account for safe for work family updates. Being family does not mean being obligated to see everything that a person is up to in all facets of their life. In the days before the corporate-owned social internet, most people had a number of different private selves that were only expressed in particular contexts. There was the worksona you put on around your colleagues, the buttoned-up family self who gave short answers to questions at weddings and funerals, the gamer self who showed up to pub trivia and got a little wild when he was drunk, the relaxed-at-home self whose balls hung out of his gym shorts, the unabashedly queer self who showed up to the parades and the bars, the kinky self that partners and close friends knew, and maybe the really controversially kinky self who only ever expressed his most freak longings around the truly accepting handful who can handle things like, age play, blood, feral, or consensual non-consent. An awareness of social context used to be really important. It's why coming out originally meant coming out into public queer life, not outing oneself to every hiring manager and neighbor. A few decades ago, people were actively discouraged from sharing their every interest, personal life detail, and identifying information on the internet. The internet was where we went to quietly express what we could not say anywhere else. Here is a screenshot from a Tumblr post of mine, and it's talking about the history of coming out. And I'll just read it out loud to you. In these times, it is important for queer people to be reminded of what coming out originally meant. Coming out did not mean telling all of your coworkers something super stigmatized and vulnerable about you, wearing your queer status on your sleeve in public, informing the police or government institutions about your sexuality, or even telling your parents. Coming out meant venturing out into the queer community, being among other queers as a queer yourself. But now the internet is a techno-feudalist attention economy that profits from our data and our eyeballs. And so we are encouraged to broadcast every personal detail to everyone and to spend all our time consuming all the posts of everyone we know. That has created a lot of conflict and uneasiness between relatives that simply never would have happened in the past. There's the fighting with your racist grandpa that's worth doing. Then there's the bad opinion your aunt has about the White Lotus that you're better off ignoring. Between those two poles, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities for human friction that you get to decide whether to engage with or not. It seems like you and your nephew are clear on the fact you don't want to fight about your wild sex life and his hang-ups. So that means you can both agree to limit your exposure to both those sides of one another. So if social media is a problem here, find other ways to stay in touch. Play games together, trade pet photos via text, meet up for coffee, and block one another on TikTok. It's totally fine. Does your nephew hate hearing you talk about sex? If so, then you can decide to share fewer details about that aspect with him directly, and he can learn to leave the room when it comes up in conversation with other people and he doesn't want to hear it. Does your nephew not like seeing kink books or gear or other suggestions of human sexuality around the house, or hearing sex talk around others? You can choose to keep the really overt stuff like floggers and sex furniture behind a locked bedroom door if you want to. But since unmasking is often about transforming our spaces and our personal presentations enough to allow us to be who we are, I'm not going to encourage you to do any of that if you do not want to. Boundaries, after all, are about what we will do to look after our own well-being. And so your nephew will have to think about what sources of discomfort he can learn to live with, which ones he can limit his own exposure to, and when he needs to politely ask you for a conversation subject change. Here is a link to Divergent Design Studios by Marta Rose, one of my major influences in my work on unmasking, and she talks a lot about how you unmask your space as well as yourself. You change how your home looks. You change also your physical presentation. A lot of unmasking for people is about breaking free from how you were taught you have to live. And so that can mean you don't have a dining room, you have a craft room, or you sleep in the living room, and you turn your bedroom into a dungeon, as someone that I know has done. The rules are out the window. You make your environment because your environment shapes your mental health and what you can do physically, literally, what activities you can take part in on a very deep level. And so you deserve to unmask your space if that is what you need to do and what makes you feel comfortable, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You can be honest with your nephew about what concessions you are able to make and how he ought to manage his responses himself. Here are some variables you might want to discuss. This is a bulleted list. Bullet 1, partners. People you date, sex, or kink with regularly are an important part of your life, and you should get to speak about these things with a beloved relative. You can agree to be vague to your nephew about what you do with your partners, but he will have to deal with the fact that there are people you have sex with, perhaps multiple people, and however that makes him feel. Bullet 2, how you spend your time. If kink is a major part of your life, you probably attend events related to that special interest like munches, conferences, sex parties, and classes, and have regular kinky dates. You can allude to these things generically to your nephew. What did I do this weekend? Oh, I went to a really interesting class on fisting, but I'm not going to say that part. And he can learn when not to ask too many questions. Bullet 3, kink gear/jewelry. Think about the role you want your kinky accoutrements to play in your life. Are you a sex swing in the living room type person in an infinity collar? Or do you wear a subtle day collar to work and keep most of your toys in a chest? Decide for yourself what level of overt kinkery in your home and personal style is best for you on your unmasking journey. You can always give your nephew a warning that walking into your home is going to expose him to some visibly sexual stuff, whether that is art, furniture, or gear. Bullet point number 4, wounds/marks/visible signs of kink. Sometimes our kinky play affects our bodies visibly, or gives us psychological dom or subdrop that people around us can pick up on. If you want to, you can be intentional about restricting marks to easy-to-cover places on the body, or only alluding to your nephew about having a tiring day. But if you feel like this will prevent you from leading your life out in the open the way you want to, then you can tell your nephew this is something he can occasionally expect to happen to you, and tell him he shouldn't ask for details if he doesn't want to hear the answer. So, for example, if you like bruises, lots of people get bruises on places that are easy to hide, like the buttocks or somewhere on the torso or upper thighs. But if you really like, vampire play, you might have a mark on your neck, right? A hickey or a bite mark. Or if you really like choking, or if you really like collaring, you might sometimes have marks in that area that are a little bit harder to hide. Some people truly love getting punched in the face, and that's harder to hide. And if that's really important to you, then that's going to freak some people out who are not kinky in your life. But people who go rock climbing, people who do extreme sports, people who do MMA fighting, those people get really dramatic injuries that others can see sometimes too. So you can either lie and say that you've gotten into boxing, or 2, tell your nephew that that you are into some physical things, and sometimes you're going to have marks, and you're fine, you're safe. He doesn't need to worry about you, and he does not need to ask questions about that because he's not going to want to hear the details. And that can be a way to navigate that. There are a few recurring themes here that you might have noticed in terms of how your nephew can protect his own peace. 1, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. 2, don't go looking for information that's going to make you upset. 3, find a way to distract yourself or calm yourself down if certain ideas make you uncomfortable. 4, ask to change the topic of conversation if you don't want to participate in it. 5, walk away when you need space, hang up the phone, etc. And 6, tailor your own digital experience using block lists, notification controls, deleting apps, etc. You both have a responsibility to one another here. You should do what you can to respect when your nephew doesn't want information and doesn't want to see anything, but he also has the responsibility to notice how he is feeling and find ways to communicate that, and to learn how to regulate it. Your nephew will absolutely make mistakes in this and say things that hurt your feelings, because he is younger than you and presumably less experienced. I think that in general, you should be patient and model for him that 2 people can have completely different feelings about a subject without either person folding and changing who they are. Try not to get too much in your own head, and remember that feeling bad or unsafe isn't the same thing as being unsafe, and that you haven't caused him any harm, even if he feels shitty. Truly. But also, sometimes you might have to just tell him to suck it up and go complain about his gross, sexually promiscuous aunt/uncle/nuncle/ however you identify to his friends. That is acceptable. People have been feeling the ick about their relatives' sexual lives since the beginning of time, probably. And he might have felt this way anyway, even if you weren't kinky. You're showing him what it looks like when someone overcomes their repression and masking and chooses to live how they want to, and giving him some amazing training in self-advocacy and conflict negotiation that will last him his whole life long. How wonderful that you have this close relationship with a young person who didn't have any other family to step up for him. I don't think it's untoward for you to still think of him as a kid as you approach this stuff. You feel an obligation to do right by him, and you know that he's been looking up to you for cues. But your responsibility is to help him continue to develop into a capable person who has a healthy relationship with you, not to coddle him or prevent every negative emotion. And all of this is a fabulous exercise in boundary setting for you, too. You can feel horrible when you haven't done a single thing wrong, and then keep on doing the thing you want to do in spite of it. And you can love someone deeply and also tell them to mind their own business. Who we are in our caregiving and familial relationships does not have to be the person we are in the dungeon. And though digital communication technology has really blurred the lines between all these aspects of us and granted everyone in our lives equal access to all sides of who we are, you do get to draw firm lines and let a significant portion of your existence be not safe for work and not open to critique. I wish both of you lots of luck and learning. That's the piece. If you'd like to submit a question to Autistic Advice or Sex Liberation, or just in general suggest a potential piece to me, you can submit it via my Tumblr Ask box, which is drdevinprice.com/ask. Or if you're not a Tumblr user, I can't imagine why, but if you're not, you can email me at askdevinprice@gmail.com, and I will take your suggestion under advisement. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out today. We'll have another piece coming up early next week that is also sexual in nature, talking about entering into the world of dating and kink in a changing transgender body. How do you start finding partners when how you look is changing and it's going to continue to change? Can you start dating the identities of people that you are interested in? For example, gay men, if you're a trans man, or do you have to wait to pass? I've lived this, got a great question about it, so we're going to talk about it at the top of next week. So keep the questions coming. Thank you, everyone, for watching and reading and all that stuff. You can support the writing by subscribing on Substack or on here. Everything I do is free always. If you choose to support the Substack, that's much appreciated, but I care about doing this stuff. I like doing this stuff, especially when it comes to talking about sex, and I want it to be as accessible as humanly possible. So I try to have multiple modalities and no paywalls. So thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being a freak of whatever kind you are, and I will see you on the channel next time. All right, bye-bye.